events, and the last event has had 70 views on Rural Kent's new YouTube channel. So people are tuning in afterwards, which is lovely, unless it's the same person 70 times, which is always possible. If you have a technical issue, post it on the chat and we'll try and deal with it, or the community that is on Zoom. You're all welcome to chip in your ideas, but don't deliberately mislead people, even if it's tempting. You know, we do sometimes struggle with bandwidth. If you turn off your video, that generally fixes it. But, you know, don't worry if you get thrown out. Zoom generally will bring you back in again as well, if you're not that familiar with it. And if the host has a problem, that seems to work somehow or other, either that just seems to relaunch or just carries on in the background. So I don't know how these things work, but it all seems to kind of work out, generally speaking. So those are some ground rules. There's some new features on Zoom, not a lot, but if you've I think you'll be encouraged by Zoom to upgrade or update. Update, isn't it? I particularly like that they finally put the raise hand function in the reactions there. You know, where you used to put your thumbs up or do a little wave or clap hands or whatever. Yeah, it's got the raise hand function in there now, so it makes it a lot easier just to put your hand up, raise a hand, have a question, and the host or co-host also gets a notification that you've put your hand up as well. So that's all working quite nicely, and that's very good, you know, because sometimes it is hard to get people's attention on Zoom. There's the stop video button if you're having problems with your bandwidth. There's the chat if you're having if you want to put some stuff on the chat as well. And if you're on a tablet, it's all up the top rather than down the bottom. But hopefully that will give you some ideas. And again, happy for you to snaffle that slide if you want to use that for any of your meetings. So yeah, we're just gonna Alice and I, one of the things that we're doing with digital media, but also traditional media in terms of engaging and consulting with communities and other groups during the current crisis. Then we've got Rosa from Commonplace, who is also a councillor, parish councillor, town councillor. Is that right, Rosa? She's going to be talking about their products. Some of you might have seen the Faversham 20 miles an hour. Or Faversham 20 campaign, and they've been using that. And then we've got Elton from Bang the Table, that's also widely used and a really useful tool for people wanting to do consultation and have a portal that does a lot of the things that you would have to have lots of different things going on to do. So, and then we've got some questions and answers at the end, and we have an optional session to, if you want to stay on just for informal chat and questions and answers, and you're not too hungry for your lunch, we're going to stay on until about 1:45. So you're very welcome to stay for that, but that is optional, of course. So I think, unless I've missed anything. Okay, so I'm going to put my sort of school teacher hat on a bit for a moment. I do a bit of lecturing at the University of Brighton on neighbourhood planning and community engagement, and I tend to kick off with this slide. This is, you know, goes back to 1969, Sherry Arnstein, a writer on community engagement, etc. And you know, it's still as relevant today as ever. I think this slide, you know. How often do we feel that we're in the 1, 2, 3 steps on the ladder, you know, manipulation, therapy, informing, when we're on the end of consultation? I mean, we would never do this ourselves, of course, but, you know, and, you know, she rather calls informing consultation placation as a kind of tokenism, and we don't really want to do that. We want to be in that partnership, delegated power, citizen control sort of phase. So I think that's always a nice little one, just to remind us that we're trying to do the very best with consultation. It's not about just paying lip service to it. We've still got some people coming in. And then this is very nice as well. This is from the Community Planning Handbook by Nick Waits. Nick is only based down in Hastings, and he has long been a sort of a guru for me, but also for community planners all over the world, really, on all the different techniques for engaging people in the planning system, but also much more broadly, you know, village halls, green spaces, everything to do with, you know, engaging communities in decision making at the highest and lowest levels. And he does this nice matrix where, again, there's a sort of going back to Sherry Arnstein, you know, information, it's a one-way flow, public relations, really. Sorry, I'll just go back. Sometimes the, oh, there we go. You know, when we're consulting, are we just giving people information? And occasionally we are, you know, or sometimes we are, you know, that is legitimate. But consultation, you know, authorities, and I guess a lot of you are from town and parish councils, so you are an authority, and you will be, you know, asking the community for their opinion, and that's perfectly legitimate as well. And you know, particularly say you're doing a neighbourhood plan towards the later stages of your neighbourhood plan, if you've done some really good engagement, you know, that consultation should be a fairly pain-free process. And sometimes people have even said to me, well, you know, you've already asked us, why are you asking us again? And, you know, that's nice when you get to that, where people feel that you've engage with them so well that when you consult with them later in the process, actually it's already done, the hard work's already been done. Partnership, I think that's where we're sort of aiming for. That's a sweet spot with community engagement. You know, it's shared decision making, shared working, shared decision making. This is perhaps, this matrix is slightly more orientated towards higher level councils, you know, districts or counties in the UK, or states or counties in the US. But nonetheless, you know, that works pretty well for me. And then there's self-help and community control. And I suppose if we went to Sherry Arnstein, you know, she'd probably say this is the sweet spot. But I think there is a danger when, particularly we're talking about working within planning or within sort of housing, that if you go off on your own too much, you can become isolated from the decision-making process, and you sometimes I was going to say you go up a rabbit hole, you go down a rabbit hole, and you perhaps need to drag yourself back to really engaging with decision makers, whether it's within your decision-making power or within the power of your, for instance, your planning authority or your housing association, etc. So that's just some Jim doing his teaching bit. So sorry about that, but I feel it's quite useful just to set the scene. Alison.
Thank you, Jim. No, I think that's really useful background, just kind of setting out the importance of why we should be engaging. I've just put this slide up here. I know it's not going to be relevant to all of you today, but some of you might be in the process of preparing a neighbourhood plan, or you might be thinking about doing one. And I just wanted to clarify what the latest guidance is, given all the most recent lockdown and the various tier system that we've been going through over the last nearly a year now. And so working backwards through the process, referendums, anyone that is planning a referendum or perhaps has had to cancel one because of the COVID restrictions, at the moment, the advice is that it won't take place until at least the 6th of May this year, but that is under debate. So there might be more coming on that. But what that does mean is that, you know, don't stop working on your neighbourhood plans, because in fact, if you can get to a point where you've had your plan examined and the local planning authority has issued what they call a decision statement, setting out that they intend for it to go to referendum, then actually your plan will be given significant weight in decision making, where the plan is material to that application. So that is really the focus of anyone doing a neighbourhood plan, is to get to that point as quickly as they can. In terms of examinations themselves, those are still happening. I've been working with a number of groups that have had examinations and having them at the moment. At the moment, they're saying written representations where possible, which is usually how an examination would take place anyway, unless there's a particularly controversial topic or, for instance, where there's housing sites involved. And we're finding that if there is a need for the examiner to actually do some sort of public engagement, that's being done via video link or Zoom, for instance. So the Community Infrastructure Levy, you often get a few questions about, well, what does this all mean for that? At the moment, anyone whose local authority has introduced the Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL, automatically will get 15% of any of those developer contributions coming to their neighbourhood boundary area. If you have a made or adopted neighbourhood plan, then that would rise to 25%. Now, obviously, in order to be made, you have to have gone through the referendum. Excuse me. So in fact, the advice at the moment is that you would only get the 15% right now. But if you are in a situation where you've got to post-examination, I would strongly recommend having a conversation with your local authority officers in the planning section, because the guidance from government is, if there is a possibility of extending that payment, that would be welcomed. So there's a definite scope there to push on that. And then obviously engagement throughout the process is a critical part of neighbourhood planning. It's intended to be a community-led process. And in fact, the neighbourhood plan regulations do require neighbourhood planning groups to bring all the information that they're collating to the public attention as much as they possibly can. And that said, it's not actually mandatory, according to the regulations, that engagement has to be done face-to-face. So this is really good news for us during lockdown, because it does mean that you can use other methods, and hopefully the sessions today will help you, inspire you to think of other ways of doing things. Another question that often comes up is, what about making copies of plans available, documents? And it is necessary to publicise your plan, but they don't, again, have to be made available at a physical location. So it could be done online. Obviously, the key here is making sure that you're considering all the different audiences that you're trying to communicate with through the process, because not all of them will have access to online methods. So you've got to think about, what other ways might there be of engaging those harder to reach groups. So at the bottom here, I just wanted to also outline the latest from Locality, who are obviously the government-funded body administrating all the grants and things for neighbourhood plans. They've advised, don't stop working on your neighbourhood plans, keep going. Most of it can be done from your home, from desk-based and so forth. ACOM, who are generally speaking the organisation that will be delivering technical support packages that you might apply for, so things like design codes or housing needs assessments, they are continuing to work. And in fact, I had a group just before Christmas doing a Zoom Google Street View walkabout of character areas, which was a really effective way of doing this. So they're still happy to be working. And just the final point there about grants, there is this additional now to the basic 9,000 grant, an additional 1,000 that you can apply for. It says largely to assist in COVID-related expenses, but practically speaking, people we've been working with have been spending on all sorts of things, but it's just to make you aware that that basic grant has gone up. So always obviously following the latest government advice. This is obviously particularly relevant to those of you doing neighbourhood planning, but I think it's good, some good sound advice of, don't stop communicating, don't stop engaging, and hopefully, as I say, today's next sessions will give you some inspirations as to different ways of doing things. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Alison. Excellent. So, right. So, I do wear another hat, which is working with a program called Big Local. Some of you may know of it. Some of you may even be from Big Locals. If you think a couple of people are from a Big Local today, put your hand up if you are. Big Local is a national program. 150 areas have all been given £1 million by the lottery, and I work with areas in Hastings and Eastbourne, and down along the coast in Sompting, and then up on the Isle of Sheppey, and in Bexley as well, in Slade Green, Bexley. It's a well endowed program. It's got quite a lot of money, and they are doing lots of social research. They are doing lots of change research, how you can influence change, make change happen, and they also produce lots of resources. And this little toolkit from Local Trust, which is the national charity that supports Big Local, is a really nice. If you're not that familiar with digital tools, I thought I was, but there were lots in here that I didn't know. My wife would probably disagree. She'd probably say I'm not very aware of digital tools. And my kids, well, don't even get them started. But this is a really nice toolkit. I've provided a link to it at the end, so you'll be able to just link straight into that. And there's some other lovely things on their website in terms of tools as well. But yeah, so how to engage remotely with your community. It's just come out, so there's some nice things in there. I mean, SurveyMonkey, most of you probably have heard of SurveyMonkey, but they give a little, description of each of the different tools. I know this a bit hard. I saw Robert putting on his glasses to try and read this. It is a little bit hard to read, but it's easier to read on the actual document itself. So it tells you, that there is a free version. I think it's up to 10 questions for free, isn't it? But there is a paid subscription starting at £25 a month. And then there's another suggestion there. SurveyMonkey is not the be all and end all. There are lots of other survey tools. There's one from Typeform as well. I just want to give a little plug to Rosemary and Rural Kent, because they've been carrying on with their housing needs surveys during the pandemic. And they tend to do paper surveys for those. And I think there is still a huge, appetite for paper surveys and for delivering those door to door. I think Rural Kent generally use the Royal Mail to do that. Sounds, a little bit old hat, but it just works, So I think, some of these things just work really well, and we should, we are talking mainly about digital today, but paper-based stuff is cracking. And for instance, if you want to get something out to the community, yes, social media is important. Yes, going online is important. Having a good website is helpful, but sending out leaflets, putting up posters in the bus stop, etc., is all really worthwhile doing. And on that note, and I think actually Rosemary said some of their rates of response have actually gone up a bit during a lockdown, and Rosemary's nodding, so that's because I guess people maybe are working from home a bit more, so they might be getting better responses. So do not think we are against paper. We are pro paper, recycled, of course. This is something I've been doing again with Planning for Real, actually, this one. So I wear another hat, which is Planning for Real. We've had to adapt because we used to make lovely big 3D models of housing estates and villages and things like that. We did one in Faversham quite a while ago, but anyone from Faversham, do make yourselves known. But this one we're doing with Brighton and Hove City Council, a campaign or consultation on their downland estate. Did you know that Brighton and Hove own 4,500 acres of the South Downs? Well, they do. And we're consulting on how that should be managed in the future. And they started off their campaign, which is all online now, all digital, with 120,000 postcards going out to every single household in Brighton. And then we've done these Zoom events subsequently. We started off with 3, and then we had to put on 5 because they were getting so packed out with people, so there is an appetite out there. Okay, it's a city, it's got a much bigger sort of catchment than you would generally speaking if you're working at town and parish council level. But I think we've got a couple of district council staff or maybe some councillors on, but don't forget paper again, but it's very much in tandem with the digital as well. Alison, did you want to say a few words about this that we've been doing with Her Screen? You did mention that we've been doing some work on character areas, so put you on the spot. Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So one of the topics that Hurst Green Parish, which is over in Sussex, has been exploring is trying to identify different character areas within their settlement. And by character areas, sort of thinking about the village as a whole. Are there parts of the village that perhaps have particular distinctive features that make them different to other parts? And if so, where are the boundaries of those? What makes them different, and so forth? And so we were able to actually do this via Zoom, weren't we, Jim?
Yep.
Using mapping tools that we've got online, and effectively being able to kind of collectively draw onto this map boundaries, colouring in, naming different sections. And I mean, I'll talk a little bit later on in the presentation about shared kind of online tools like this, but it was a really good way of sort of having the ability to use a map-based pictorial tool, but collectively online, and gathering information in a much more visual way than perhaps you would normally do at a meeting on Zoom, using, you know, just words and being able to use this map as the backdrop. So I think that was really helpful, wasn't it, Jim?
And yeah, and we'd had a couple of meetings with them, and I don't know if I don't think there's anyone from her screen on, but they've been a bit quiet, a little bit passive in the meetings. But suddenly we got the map out, we got the drawing tools out, and you'll see the little annotate function on the screen there, which you could even use now if you wanted to. You could start graffitiing our session if you want to give that a go. But yeah, suddenly it animated the room, or the Zoom room, and you know, we just and people who'd been quiet in previous meetings suddenly got stuck in, and that was, I think that was quite an interesting sort of psychologically thing going on there. And there are other things that you can do to collaborate. So this is from Horsman Den. I can't remember if I couldn't see anyone from Horsman Den. Maybe do make yourself known. But we've mapped. Well, we're doing a sort of we're doing a neighbourhood plan in Horsman Den, and we worked with the group that are developing the neighbourhood plan to identify views. So they did a photographic competition online in the community, got the word out that they were doing this, and people were able to upload their photos, and there was a photo competition, and the best photos were judged, all the rest of it. So we got lots of engagement from the community like that, and then we were able to take those views and we were able to put them onto my Google Maps and plot them all. And we were able to upload the photos to those little icons that you can see, or markers, and we were able to describe the views and where they were, so that we can now pass those on to a mapping person, a cartographer, as they used to be called, who will put that onto our proposals map for mapping the key views in and out from the parish or from the village in our neighbourhood plan. So, you know, yeah, it's just sort of, you know, lots of people do photo competitions. I remember we did one with Goudhurst and seeing all the photos up in the village hall and looked terrific. You know, they looked fantastic, and they were then used later on in the neighbourhood plan. But you know, it's just taking that idea and developing it out. And then just another little bit of work that we did in Hove with Planning for Real again. On a master plan, and this was very much consultation, it was information sharing, but we used something called Mentee Meter. Actually, I think I need to add that into the slide at the end, how to find Mentee Meter. And I think we did a Mentee on the last event, didn't we? Keith's nodding, so yes, we did. I'm not going to inflict that one on you today, but it's a really nice way, if you're on Zoom or on one of these other platforms, to say to people, you know, we'd like, you know, what are the opportunities? What are the threats? What's worrying you? And these word clouds, you know, people use their phone or their tablet to input ideas, and suddenly you've got sort of, you know, all these ideas appearing on the screen, and it's just a nice engaging way of maybe sort of getting the conversation flowing. People can be a bit reluctant to sort of jump in and speak and all the rest of it. I just aware of time slipping away, I must press on, sorry about this. So that's here are some other tools from Alison.
Yeah, I won't spend too long bearing in mind time, but I don't know if anybody has had a look at this, but Google actually offer quite a range of free tools. I became familiar with them largely through lockdown when my two children, who have Google Chromebooks from the school, started using all these different things. And I thought, oh, actually, these are quite interesting for engagement with some of the groups we're working with. So you'll have heard of some of them. And obviously YouTube we talked about, it's a really good way of, if you are having a Zoom meeting and you want to record it, you can then upload it onto YouTube for free. As Jim mentioned earlier, our last session of one of these workshops has since been viewed, was it 70 times or so? So it's a really good way of engaging people that can't necessarily come to your online meeting, but might want to hear what's being said. That symbol in the bottom, which isn't labelled, is Google Drive, and Google Photos to the right, which again are free storage areas. Many of you might be wanting to share documents or photographs, and particularly large documents you don't want to be emailing back and forth. It's just a useful way of storing those and being able to access them as a group collectively and update them in real time so that you're always working off the same copy. So I just thought it was worth flagging those. Google Maps, as I mentioned earlier, really good way of encouraging people. Someone in the comments, by the way, said Dropbox is an alternative. Absolutely. I'm not working for Google. I'm just sharing these particular examples, but Box is another one as well. Google Maps, one of the things that we find a really good way of engaging people is to do what's called walkabouts around their local communities. So actually gathering together a group of people to look at a very specific issue, whether it's local views, whether it's the state of footpaths, or looking at historic assets in their village or town. Now, obviously that's not been possible to do lately, but again, an example down in a group in Devon that we're working with hosted one of these on Zoom as it happened, using the Street View tool, and able to then collectively discuss as we were zooming around the area, looking at the actual buildings, as they are, and gathering that information. So it's just a kind of thinking of another way of achieving the same outcome. Google Meet is a very similar thing to Zoom, a free tool for a certain amount of time, which I think is a bit better than what Zoom offers, so something perhaps to look at. But in particular, I just wanted to focus on this Jamboard, which is a sort of strange idea here at the top, which I'd never come across before until quite recently, where it enables you to interact online. If everybody can sign up to Google, which is free, you're all able to go onto this Jamboard tool, which is basically like having a shared flip chart online. And if you just move a slide forward, Jim, we did an exercise in the parish of Aldington and Bonington near Ashford, where we were doing a visioning exercise with them, and we used this Jamboard tool. So part of it was us kind of creating some initial slides, almost like in PowerPoint, a bit like this one, which was static but enabled us to introduce the session. And then if you move to the next slide, Jim, we then took them through the idea of preparing an analysis of what's good about where you live, what's not so good, opportunities and threats, so this SWOT analysis idea. And again, because everyone was logged in, we were able to, all of us, type immediately onto the screen and see what people were doing. So it became a very interactive and very fun session in many ways, and people felt very much more engaged than simply listening to someone and reporting back verbally. And then this final one here, this is a really nice aspect of this Jamboard app, which enables you to kind of stick on post-it notes and rearrange them around the board depending on which ones are more important. So in terms of this visioning exercise, which this one happened to be, it was a nice way of gathering kind of statements, and then we then use those to then position them into different topics, which we could then use to actually define the vision more effectively. So just wanted to flag that because I think it's a really useful thing, and I don't think everyone is necessarily familiar with all those tools that are freely available out there.
Brilliant. Sorry, and apologies for overrunning slightly, especially to Rosa, who's going to be speaking in a moment. So these are the resources that we've been covering. There might be a couple we've missed. I'll just double check those before we send this on to you. But this presentation with all the links there will be sent on to you so you can access those. All right, thanks very much. So that's the end of our little session. And we are now going to go over to Rosa, who's going to share her screen with us in a moment, I think. Rosa's from Commonplace, like I say, maybe famous to you from the Faversham 20 campaign.
Thanks very much, Jim, for your kind introduction. I hope you can all see my screen now. Just maybe a thumbs up if you can. Wonderful, excellent. So I'm Rosa, as Jim mentioned. I'm a business development manager here at Commonplace, and then also, as Jim mentioned earlier on, I'm also an elected councillor. Actually, twice elected. I sit on West Oxfordshire District Council, very rural district. So very similar things to what you're dealing with in Kent. And I'm also a former town leader of the Witney Town Council, which is a large market town, a very rural market town here in West Oxfordshire as well. So thanks very much for having me. It's lovely to be here. I'm fairly new to rural Kent. I've sort of got to know them as I've joined Commonplace in the last few months, and it's been really inspiring actually, the work they're doing. So I'm really pleased to be introduced to the organisation. This webinar in particular is exciting for me because obviously with both my hats on, community engagement is very close to my heart. So at Commonplace, we're all about connecting people to places, and that's places where they maybe live, work, or even places they just visit. We do consultations and we do engagement projects, but actually what we're really interested in is creating a series of opportunities for joined up conversation about place. We really believe that these joined up conversations are the most important thing that comes out of engagement. We do, I know there's been a lot of talk about paper versus digital, and we do take a digital first approach. That's what our organisation is, it does, it's what we do. But we're very clear, and we always have been, that is only part of any engagement. And one of the things I'm most excited about is the way we're able to incorporate both of those things. So we're very much still encourage paper engagement, and we have a way of feeding it straight into our Commonplace platform, so the data is all collected together, making it really easy for whoever's using that. I think the main reasons for non-digital engagement, as Jim's touched on, is you do get deeper interactions, and it also continues those building of relationships. But also, I think most importantly, is it makes sure that it's accessible to 100% of the community. And I know Rosemary from rural Kent, as she's been doing her paper consultations, that's something she's commented on really, is the accessibility of them. However, and I'll talk about this a little later on, what we've learned is through digital engagement is reach is really important. And we've been able to reach a lot more people, but also a much more diverse range of people, which is really important, I think, when you're especially making changes in people's environments and really building that trusted consent for change. So why is digital engagement so important? Well, we've had close to 2.5 million people engage with Commonplace to date, and I think, you know, we've all experienced this bizarre year we've had with the pandemic. So what's been quite interesting for us is that 1.5 million of those engagements have been since the beginning of 2020. So that probably shows you how things are changing as the pandemic hit us, and we all sort of learnt to communicate a bit more remotely. 87% of people say that they want to hear more about projects and conversations in their area. And, you know, that's just brilliant, I guess, with both my hats on, but especially with my my district councillor hat on and my town councillor hat on, to hear that people want to be involved in what's going on in their communities is hugely important to me. On average, when a user contributes to Commonplace, they contribute 6 times. And we really like this because we're seeing this as a clear demand for ongoing conversation rather than just these episodic interactions. So that's really important. And people demand feedback. And one of the things we find really important through Commonplace is to give the organisation who's running the consultation or the engagement that opportunity to feedback with people, but also the other people who are engaging to be able to upvote comments and suggestions that other people have made. So we've got engagement between the people engaging in the proposals or whatever it might be as well. We find that we reach much younger audiences, and this is something that's really exciting to us. We not that we focus on, but we very much receive under 45s using the platform, which I think is really important, because I think particularly in rural areas, younger people are much more difficult to engage, particularly in things that, you know, might not automatically interest them, like you know, the built environment, changes to their surroundings, but really important that we bring those people into the consultation as well. So let's talk a little bit about the COVID effect and what has happened this last year. I did touch on the fact that, you know, we've had this huge amount of engagement just in the last year, and I think a lot of that's related to you know, how we've so abruptly learnt to work remotely with each other. So we've seen 60% of people using more of their local spaces, their parks and things, than they were before lockdown, and that's, you know, that should be celebrated. That's incredible. On Commonplace, we've had over 500,000 responses from communities relating to COVID, and that's everything from emergency transport measures to, you know, planning for building back better, whatever that means when we get there. Communities are more interested in open dialogue than they've ever been before, and I think, I mean, I've touched on this, but this is something I think is really important, to engage people in the community and bring them into that decision making. Is it's good democracy, and it's good for conversation building and community building. And so I guess from that, what we've seen is that engagement is now expected. Communities expect to be engaged on things, and lockdown has really shone a light on what's been possible of doing that digitally. So I mentioned young people, and so we've done a bit of research because we're really keen on the idea of using COVID and the pandemic as an opportunity to engage more people, and what's available through digital engagement tools. So we've seen that 70% of our responses are from under 45s, and we've analysed over 1,000 of these, over 1,000 of these tend to be from under 35 on our Commonplace projects. So as you can see here, 63% of them were from urban areas, but 37% from rural areas. And as I've mentioned before, engagement in rural areas does tend to be harder, and especially with younger people. So we're really proud of that figure. And just a little bit on what we're hearing from younger people. So we're hearing, and I include myself in these under 45s, I should add, not quite under 35, but we'll go for under 45. So the things we're hearing that we want to see is a variety of shops and shopping experiences on our high streets. I think our high streets have become so much more important to us, and our local shops and our local cafes that have been able to stay open, they've become important to us because we're working from home. We're not popping to the nearest large chain coffee shop near our office building anymore. We're popping into our local community, and that's really wonderful to see. Also our road safety, and I'm going to get on to talking about our Faversham project, and that's been a big one for them there. And then also our community spaces, so our parks and things that we're all using a lot more, which is wonderful to see. I guess the main message from all of this is that through these engagements, we've seen that openness enhances trust, and then ultimately what we do from our platform is it gets you this great data. So it gets you the information on what communities are really asking for and really seeing, and really helps you understand what it is they want. So when, as I know there's lots of councillors and council officers on the call, when we're making those changes, we're really seeing consent for change because we're taking the time to engage. So let's talk about Faversham. And Jim, I'm not very good at timekeeping myself, so do tell me when you need me to wrap up. But I would like to talk about,
couple more minutes.
Thank you. I would like to talk about Faversham a little bit. So Faversham was a project we worked on with Faversham Town Council, but very much initiated from community campaigns and the community ask for their area to be safer, and for traffic calming measures, and for this 20 mile-an-hour zone. So Faversham Town Council has set up a Commonplace with us. It's actually an active site. So if you are from Faversham, or you use Faversham, or you work there, do go and take a look and have your say. So we worked with them to build a Commonplace platform to allow their community to really have a response to the 20 mile-an-hour zone, which is currently a temporary measure, as I understand it, and have their say in making these changes. What's been really great in Faversham is that so far, and like I said, it's an ongoing engagement. So far, over 2,000 people have engaged with it, and there's been over 1,000 ideas and observations. So you can see down in the corner of the slide here is an example of what one of our platforms looks like, and you can see the way people have dropped a pin and then they've commented on it, and that's really lovely. It's really lovely to see. It's a genuinely blended approach. So like I said at the beginning, we've got the town council working on it. We've got funding from the county council and the active travel fund that's come from the government, and then also the community groups and the campaign groups that have tried to get this going. And I know the 20s Plenty campaign have been heavily involved. So focusing, the main focus of their project was to make Faversham healthier, safer and cleaner for everyone. I mean, I know I'm a bit of a rural town buff, but I think wherever you come from, that seems like a really good goal. So it's something we should all be aiming for. And if we can get there whilst making everyone happy through engagement, then why wouldn't we? So the priorities that have been emerging from this consultation are to enable more active travel. And there's been a lot of talk about active travel, particularly since the pandemic. The government have committed money to it, which has been really good, because it's meant that authorities have had an opportunity to really focus on people moving around their area, their locations more safely and more actively, also having a big effect on our climate as well, and our climate crisis. As I mentioned, it's about creating safer streets and improving that access that we talked about to businesses and local amenities, which is super important, especially as we're all working from home. I hope we're all supporting our local sandwich shop at lunchtime and that sort of thing. So that's Faversham, and like I said, it's an active site, so do go and have your say if you're a Faversham local or a Faversham user. I guess just to wrap up, I wanted to invite you all to another webinar. We've got this coming up next Wednesday. We've got a great panel of speakers, and for us it's all about the Planning for the Future white paper. We've done a lot of research around it, and this webinar will really sum up our research and what it's revealed, and how community engagement can be brought into future planning. So you can sign up for that on the Commonplace website, and Jim, maybe we can send a link round afterwards if possible. Yeah. So yeah, just to wrap up there, I guess community engagement and digital engagement for me has been a huge part of the last year, not least because for me it's been a career transition joining Commonplace, but also because I've seen the effect it's had on local communities, and as a councillor, the effect, the sort of the happiness and the positiveness coming from communities as they're able to engage, and that's been really wonderful. So I think if we can continue having these joined up conversations and continue engaging, whether it's by paper or digitally, we're in really great shape for meaningful conversations and great consent for change within communities.
Brilliant, Rosa. Thanks very much for that. That was a really good tour through all the opportunities there, and a nice plug for your event next week as well. We are overrunning a bit, almost inevitably. We will just keep going until everyone's had enough. But we're going to give Elton his full 10 minutes now. If you've got any sort of direct questions for Rosa, you can direct message her. Just click on her image on the Zoom's call, and you'll be able to bring up a chat directly with Rosa and ask her any questions. So Elton, now from Bang the Table, Engagement HQ is yours.
Thank you very much. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent, that's a good sign. Can you see the PowerPoint on screen?
Elton, you might just want to turn your video off, because you are just dragging a little bit on the voice.
Okay, so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stop.
Is that better? Is the sound coming through a bit better now?
Yes, yeah, that's great.
Brilliant. Okay, well, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm aware of your time as well, so I'll rattle on with this, and thanks, Rosa, for that introduction prior to that as well. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit around Bang the Table, who we are, what our Engagement HQ platform does, which is a cloud-based platform to basically support a lot of different community engagement and public consultation initiatives across a really, really broad range of sectors. And as it suggests on screen, taking it slightly beyond the survey with a really, really broad range of deep engagement tools. And then we'll have a little look, if it works okay, just at some existing live client sites so you can see how different clients are evolving their digital engagement strategies in short, long, mid and long term as well. So in terms of Engagement HQ, we've been present in the UK since 2018, and we've been working with a lot of different clients across a really broad range of sectors around taking public consultations online, which has never been more prevalent than obviously since March last year, and the absence of those face-to-face events. But also we're working very, very closely with the housing sector and utilities sectors around customer and resident involvement. And there is a bit of a disconnect at the moment between customers and residents and housing associations, for example, and particularly with the publishing in December last year of that social housing white paper, there's a really, really big focus on that in terms of the voice of the customer and giving people a say in really, really important decision making. And so it's building that trust with communities at this time as well. And then using our platform, you can also undertake stakeholder member engagement type projects as well, which are closed to the public. So there's a really, really broad range of applications to what we do with our partnership working. And as I say, there's a broad representation there in terms of sectors. And my background personally is in the education sphere. So I was a former director of student experience at a London-based higher education provider. We do work in the education sector as well, but in addition to that, of course, a lot of local councils we're now working with in a really broad range of innovative ways, and they're using our platform to great effect. And I'll show you a couple of live client sites before we close off them for questions afterwards. But also police and crime commissioners and charities and, as I mentioned, utilities companies and the Environment Agency as well. So in terms of what Engagement HQ is and what do our clients get from actually partnering with us to evolve a digital engagement strategy. So it's those things highlighted there on screen. So the ability to capture feedback online in a safe GDPR compliant online space is of paramount importance. And what I mean by safe is away from the kind of misinformation that we see in the Twitter sphere and the Facebook sphere and other sorts of social media platforms. We moderate all of our sites on behalf of our clients. So there's a human team of global moderators who are looking at the tools that are used within Engagement HQ, which I'll come on and show you shortly, looking for things that are going off topic, obviously taking out keywords, which I won't go through today. So it basically creates what we would call a semi-formal environment within which people who are normally quiet at the back of a room in the kind of face-to-face scenarios can feel empowered to come forward and have their say, confident that people won't be rude to them effectively. In doing so, you can provide your communities with access to really accurate information using our information widgets. So there's a lot of different ways you can present information back to your communities at all times, and you can be safe in the knowledge that that information that they're receiving is accurate. And this then starts to build that really effective two-way communication between a council, for example, and its residents, or a housing association and its residents. And then on the back of, it's something that Rosa alluded to, what do we do with all that data? You can undertake extensive analysis and reporting on the back of all the information you get from your residents within your Engagement HQ site. And this enables you to, really importantly, close the loop on any consultations and then feed back to communities about the actions that were taken as a result of the engagement activity that you undertook online, and really extending that reach out as well. So obviously involving a lot of young people and using mobile phones and things like that to get involved in what you're doing at all times. So in terms of those deep engagement tools I alluded to earlier, things that we're obviously really familiar with, like polls and surveys, are absolutely possible online in Engagement HQ. But in addition to that, over this side where the discussion forums and ideas boards and places tools are, these are the really deep engagement tools which take it, and I know I alluded to it on the first slide, beyond the survey. So what's driving those survey responses in terms of questions that people have been asked and the way they responded? You can tease their ideas out and encourage them to tell stories about things that you've asked them, and drop pins on a map, as Rosa has alluded to as well, and leave comments about certain things and then report on it afterwards, or get involved in really, really engaging multi-threaded discussion forums. But without any further ado, I'll just briefly go over the information widgets, and I'll show you some of those tools live before we close, so you can see, obviously it's a bit conceptual, you can actually see how that looks live in terms of clients and how they're using them. This is a really broad range of information widgets here, and there's a lot of options available. The platform's completely customizable and anything can be overtyped in terms of the names of these widgets here. And this enables you to give communities and residents really accurate information at all times. And all of that, briefly then, is supported by our commitment to global best practice engagement. And we undertake a lot of website scoping, online training, and there's a lot of other additional support that we give clients when they on board with us in order to evolve a digital engagement strategy over time, using all of those tools and widgets to great effect, depending on the types of consultations and length of consultations you may want to run as well. And we do regular client roundtables, which are attended by all of those sectors that you saw on screen earlier, to brainstorm ideas around digital engagement as well. So I hope that's a useful overview, and I'll very briefly then just go through and show you in practice how those tools have been used. And these are all examples of live client sites from various clients that we're working with at present. This is BCP Council, and they've done a transforming travel consultation with us using their Transforming Cities Fund, and it's part of that programme. Those information widgets that I was alluding to there reside down this side, and they're customised in this case in keeping with what BCP Council want their residents to see. They put out a lot of information, whether it's video based or image based, down the side here, and they've outlined their project quite clearly here as well, linking also to a lot of other areas of their own website. So it's not meant to replace their own website, but this is where people can get involved in the decisions that are affecting them. This is an example of an ideas board, and this is effectively like virtual post-it notes on a wall in the virtual environment. So as you can see, it builds up into a really, really neat board of people's views and opinions, and people have got the ability to like and comment on each other's opinions. But again, you can turn all those functions on and off with ease, and it gives people the option to upload images as well. So it builds up into a really, really neat board of data and views and opinions that they can then report on afterwards, and then feedback in terms of what decisions were taken afterwards. And I'm happy to share examples of these with you all as well. Further to what Rose was saying about the importance of people being able to drop pins on maps and gather data in that way, this is an example from Wirral Council for the new Brighton Master Plan, which isn't in East Sussex as I first thought. And this enables people to drop pins on a map, in this case around opportunities, assets, issues, or in this case a suggestion for a Lido. You can see those concentrations of pins there as I zoom in terms of those numbers, and these are all the individual comments that have been left by residents in this case. And you can see a full activity feed, and again you can take all of that data in the back end of Engagement HQ and report on it afterwards. Very quick example then of a stories tool. So there's no character limit to this. You can use it for all sorts of purposes. In this case, Inspire Cheshire West, one of our clients, used it for how is the community pulling together to support one another during the pandemic. And as you can see, really, really good visual representation from the community in terms of stories that people are putting in there. Again, supplemented by those information bearing widgets down the side. And it just builds up into a really, really neat list of stories that people have been able to submit. And when you click on any single one of those, you can see there's not really much of a character limit there, and you can write a lot of information in as a resident. And as I did say, it's possible for people to contribute via mobile phones as well to these. So it's what we call on the couch engagement. People can get involved as and when they wish to drop a pin or submit a story. This is a quick example then of Cornwall Council, and this is a discussion forum which, as I mentioned, enables the council to get involved in discussion, residents to discuss, in this case, changes the council may need to make now to something or other. Again, I will send you examples so you can have a look under your own steam. This is a very, very quick whistle-stop tour, but it just shows you how that becomes a really, really detailed discussion rather than just a very, very dry list of comments. And then you can do things like Q&A, and you can ask people questions, and you can respond publicly and privately to them as well. So it's just a quick, very quick example of that. And there's nothing wrong with surveys. I wasn't being disparaging about them. We do have a survey tool. I don't know how much you would consult around elephants in your area, but it's just to give you an example of the different sorts of question types within our survey tool as well.
Elton, sorry, just to jump in a sec, Elton, we are at full time now. So
yeah, that's fine.
I just in case anyone wants to sort of leave us, please do be reassured that we will send you the presentation slides and contact details for all these people. Sorry, Elton, I didn't necessarily want you to stop.
No, that's fine. I was right at the end there anyway.
Oh,
I can share those links afterwards.
Oh, well, that's very good of you. All right. Okay. So yeah, we will send, if anyone's got to rush off now or has had to go away, we will be sending all this stuff to you. I mean, it was great, wasn't it? Hear all this stuff going on and how people are adapting, you know, in very difficult circumstances. People haven't been putting a lot of questions on the chat, but so do just put up your hand either physically or virtually if you do have a question. But we've had some questions about how much things cost. I would suggest that maybe you know, you contact either Elton or Rosa directly to get details of their pricing. I know that they are looking at, well, Elton bang the table, do a sort of price based on population, and Rosa's also Commonplace are looking at their pricing for parish and town councils as well. Yeah. Any questions? So, oh yeah, so someone's put in the questions, Peter Collinson, how do you reassure people that their comment is taken account of? Well, I mean, you know, obviously on some of these platforms, you know, you are able to directly respond to people, and you know, I think the reassurance of seeing their comments put up on a platform does suggest that it is going to be listened to. I think it is important for you as you know, people that are doing the consulting to get that messaging across. But also, I mean, you know, there was a comment, is this all about neighbourhood planning? I hope we haven't done it all about neighbourhood planning, but if you were in a planning situation, you would obviously produce a consultation statement that shows how you've responded to people's comments and questions and suggestions, but I think that is good practice. So I think, you know, that is something I would recommend if you were doing any consultation, is that you produce a statement saying, you know, how you've listened to people and then how you've responded, and we could probably give you some links to some examples. I mean, I know that like with Planning for Real, when we've been working on housing estates, nothing to do with planning, you know, very much about social regeneration, you know, we always produce all the responses, every single comment. Rose has got a hand up, yeah?
Thanks, Jim. I'd love to respond to this one, actually, Peter. I think it's a super important question. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time looking at and researching at Commonplace is, you know, how do we build that trust within communities, and how do we build that consent for change that I've mentioned a couple of times. And I think the point you raise is incredibly important. It's about that feedback link. So it's about people knowing that their comment just doesn't get put into a big collection of comments and nothing's done about it. It's not just about data, it's about the individual feelings of the individual people living in communities, especially in smaller communities. That's really important. So one of the things we focused on at Commonplace is being able to allow the admin, so whoever's running the platform in the local authority or from the community group that's using Commonplace, to respond directly to people who have engaged when necessarily when a response is required. But also we have a news feature, so there's constant updates on what's happening with the project, and quite often a lot of them come off the back of comments and suggestions. A really lovely story I like is that we've there's a leisure centre consultation that we've been doing, and we've done it from the very beginning, from the start of it being, you know, an idea to rebuild a leisure centre in this community, and we've seen people feed in ideas, and then you get to a stage where the leisure centre's built and people feel ownership over it because they feel, oh, I suggested something along those lines, I suggested that, and that's super important, and that's all about building that trust and that consent for change.
Thank you, Rosa. So we've got another question on the chat from Madeline. I was wondering what your recommendations would be for engaging in deeper discussions, consensus building conversations online. It seems like virtual engagement is great for info sharing, but more difficult to have those higher conversations, those conversations on the higher rung, sort of Einstein's ladder. Thanks. Okay, so does anyone want to come back on that one? I mean, I can have a go, but Alison? Maybe put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's another very interesting question, isn't it? And I think this is kind of the test bed we're in at the moment, trying to evolve how we all manage this this distant situation that we all find ourselves in. And you're right, a lot of the tools I think are about gathering information, and I think there's lots out there that, and lots of ways of doing that quite successfully. But what you actually then want to do, and talking more in depth about the information that you've gathered and how that then distills itself into, you know, whatever it is your project is trying to achieve, be it planning policies or be it, you know, putting a project together to run a community facility or something, is going to be a little bit more difficult. And some of those Google tools that we talked about, I think, are a way of trying to kind of adapt what you might have as a normal workshop setting, so where you can use visual aids like maps, flip charts, have break-off groups, and do kind of discussion forums like that, trying to emulate that on a virtual platform. And certainly the experience I think we've had, Jim, is that, you know, once we've got used to using these tools, we have found them to be really helpful at engaging people. And I think I think it's true to say that most of us are all a bit zoomed out at the moment over the last year. And what they have done, so the Jamboard, for instance, it gives people something a bit different to focus on. And it is a way of inspiring some different conversations that you might not have if you're simply looking at, like I am now, you know, numerous faces on a screen, but sort of no other aids to help that discussion. So if I were you, I'd have a look at some of those free tools, and I'm sure there are others out there too, and just have a play around with them. I know that some of the schools are doing that in their lessons. So, you know, there is a lot out there to kind of encourage debate and encourage discussion in a way that is a bit more familiar to us if we were doing it in a normal setting. What do you think, Jim? Do you have anything to add to that? Or
yeah, I think, I mean, you know, certainly workshops are going very well on Zoom. Some of the stuff we've done with Big Local, you know, where we've had big groups from all around the country on a Zoom or other platform, and then we've gone into breakout groups, and even having whole day events with breaks. I would emphasize. You know, really works. You can have your coffee break, you can have your lunch break, you can do your breakout rooms, you can have your warm-up sessions after lunch in that graveyard slot. You know, all that is translatable. So I think, you know, yes, it is an ask for people, but if you manage it, I mean, my rule is 1.5 hours is you know, the max in one session without having a break. So I think, you know, you do have to stick to these things. Numbers above 80 are hard to manage. So I think that's another point. I saw Dora's got a hand up. Dora, do you want to take yourself off mute?
Yes, thanks very much. It's all very interesting. I was just wondering what your views are about actually reaching out to people. I represent a very urban area, work for in a very urban area, and I have lots of people who are very elderly, who can't get out very easily, who are who've got disabilities, some may live in sheltered housing. What's your views or comments about going to them rather than them coming to us, as it were.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, a good point, Dora. And I think that's why this mixed media is a really good thing to do. I mean, you know, use leaflets, use paper questionnaires still. We've got Richard Bartley from Y on the Zoom, and when this was long before Zoom, but when they did their survey, they hand delivered to every household and they collected from every household. And I think, you know, you could even do that under Zoom and have a doorstep under COVID, and have a doorstep conversation, eat socially distanced, following all the rules, you know, with a proper risk assessment. So I think, you know, there is something to be said for that mixed media approach. We have had 90-year-olds on Zoom. So, you know, I mean, you know, if you're working in a community development setting, you know, you work with, you know, contact the sheltered housing, see if you can arrange for tablets to be handed out, or residents to be, you know, it may be that it is a longer term community development approach to reach those isolated people. But I mean, a group down in Sompting, which is a big local area, they do a coffee morning once a week, and anyone can just drop in, and that's gone very well. And they've you know, and they've actually linked up with a group in the Northwest for those coffee mornings, and they share a coffee morning, and they've got to know each other. So, you know, it is, you know, there is something to be said. I think we've got someone from Wales on today. So, you know, but yeah, I think, you know, you do have to go that extra mile.
It is doable. I mean, what I've done in the past is think of the local school. The school, young kids come along with the tablets, and they sort of like one-to-one with the elderly people. And they help them to, you know, to access the tablets. So it can be done. I just wanted to know what your opinion was.
Yeah, no, definitely go for it. But it is, you know, trying, you know, what another thing I say to groups as well is, you know, use all the different media. You know, some people say, oh, well, we did a leaflet drop and no one responded. Well, if you did the leaflet drop with the poster, with the banner on the village green or at the entrance to the housing estate, plus the, you know, the social media, don't forget, you know, we haven't talked much about social media today, but, you know, Facebook is still really powerful, and the other platforms are available, Twitter, etc. So, you know, yeah, you've got to do all of those, and only the theory is, isn't it, it's the 7th time someone sees something or hears something that they'll actually respond. So yeah, that's what I mean. That may be sort of like a bit overwhelming for some of you, but that's the effort you've got to make.
Just to say, I think that's a really lovely idea though that Dora's sort of expressed there, of this idea of young people, you know, children, teenagers, doing the engagement with older, hard to reach audiences perhaps, which also unlocks perhaps some different conversations that, you know, we of this generation might not have with either of those groups. So I think that's a lovely idea.
Yeah. So someone's put on chat about toxic social media platforms. I'm just going to have a read of that. So yes, I think, you know, the toxic social media, I mean, Elton, and I didn't hear Rosa, but I'm sure they're moderating their stuff that people put up. Rosa's nodding there. So you do get that moderation service by using one of these sort of organisations, which I think, you know, if you've had trouble in the past, so Rosa's going to come back on that, yeah?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I was just going to come in on that. One of the things that we've tried this a few different ways at Commonplace, and one of the things we've concluded is that if you let people comment on people's comments, you get this down spiral of the toxic social media you're talking about. So what we do is we allow people to agree with comments, or if you don't agree, write your own comment. So people take that upon themselves to write what they're feeling, as opposed to just leading to that downfall of toxicity that we do see on those social media platforms. There's a place for that. It's not commonplace.
And I see that Robert Holt was also picking up on the comment that Dora made about older people, you know, and I mean, yes, I think, you know, we do struggle to get to younger people, I would say. So traditionally, so I do think, you know, there is a rebalancing going on. Robert, you've got your hand up. Do you want to just?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm Robert up there. I'm Bob, and suddenly it's gone to Robert. There we are. It was always when I was naughty, my grandmother used to call me Robert, but there we are. I'm Bob. What Dora was saying is very interesting to me because before all this started, I was very involved in pantomime. And our particular pantomime covered 95-year-olds to 5-year-olds. And the 5-year-olds and youngsters were usually incredibly difficult to control. But what we found is the 95-year-olds were the key to it. They got together, perhaps the older people are the more naughty than the younger ones, I don't know. But there was this real sort of rapport between the oldest and youngest. And the in-betweeners were okay. So it's very interesting. And I think it's a great idea getting young people to do that.
Well, there's that, I think on television there's been that program, hasn't there, of you know, toddlers going into you know, older people's homes and kind of mixing with them and creating, you know, surprising friendships, or perhaps unsurprising if actually it's probably quite normal, really. I think it's a delightful idea, and I think it's definitely something that, you know, we could recommend in some of the communities we work with as a way of engaging both those groups and having another outcome of, you know, encouraging sort of a more community feel as well.
Yeah, I mean, with the behaviour online, I mean, you know, something we used to do with Planning for Real when we were doing big events, some of those whole day events, is we would actually spend, if we felt that there was a bit of a vibe going on, we might spend a bit of time just brainstorming some ground rules on people's behaviour. And if you've actually got them up there in advance, it's much easier then to refer people back to them and say, so you could do that on a social media platform as well, you know, sort of say, you know, look, we've got some issues coming up, you know, do you want to suggest some ground rules, you know, and maybe follow that through. So yeah, I think it becomes much better coming from the audience as well than necessarily from teacher, you know, as well, if they're actually sort of suggesting those ideas themselves. So I know, do raise your hand if you've got another question. You've been a lovely polite audience today, and no problems with the ground rules today. So as I say, we're going to put everything up on the Rural Kent website. I'd like to thank Rural Kent very much for hosting today, making this available. We couldn't have done it without them, as they say. Rosemary, who's been doing all the admin and getting the messages out to people, but is really sort of, you know, working like crazy behind the scenes on this. I'd like to thank Elton and Rosa for speaking. Alison and I will thank you ourselves for speaking. But you know, it's really good to see so many of you taking an interest in this. And I mean, you know, when I go back to my University of Brighton students, I'll say, you know, there is real interest in this because they're all professional planners on a master's in urban planning over there, and you know, sometimes they can be a bit cynical about the appetite in communities for engaging and consulting and giving people a voice, yeah, I suppose we are just giving people a voice ultimately, and it's really important, as I think someone put in the message, that it should be heard. Okay, so some extra things going in about free webinars that are coming up, so that's really good. Yeah, Richard said he likes the bang the table moderation feature. Oh, and he's asked what's the lead-in time for approval or something? How quickly can you moderate stuff, Elton and Rosa?
Yeah, the simple answer is pretty quickly. So if someone submits a story through, they'll receive an email that confirms to them that it's gone under moderation, and that will be checked very, very quickly. So the global moderators isn't just someone staying up with a lot of coffee all night, because we have sites in Australia, New Zealand, Canada and the US as well. So there's a lot of them that are working on it, and typically within a few minutes a story will be approved and then it will appear live on the storyboard once it's gone through. The same with discussion forums as well, so any of those comments and things go through that moderation process first. And there is an AI level of moderation as well, actually, which automatically filters out, as I say, very obvious keywords that can't be used, swear words.
Yeah, very similar here. I think similar technology. It's automated for those keywords you'd expect, which are filtered out immediately. And then our customer success team work really hard on making sure people's names aren't mentioned and things like that, just to keep it a really, really safe space.
Yeah, I mean, just on a practical note, on a Zoom, for example, just recording this as we are doing will impact on people's behaviour. So, you know, the fact that they know that it might actually be broadcast later will moderate most people's behaviour. Sometimes you will have to intervene, and you know, and there is the mute button, which is quite handy. But yeah, I think, like say, we are seeing some pretty good behaviour on the whole, and so I should say, always do give it a try. I mean, you know, there may be some people either in your community or council officers that might be more experienced than you in these matters. It's always worth asking for their help. Obviously, there are good facilitators out there, and so not so good ones, but you know, there are people that you can ask for help, and of course Rural Kent will be always there to give advice, and a lot of that is free advice, particularly if you're a member of Rural Kent. So I would encourage you, if you're not a member of an organisation like Rural Kent or your local CVS, to council voluntary service, to use those really expert people, and to help with all this stuff as well, because there's some really good people out there. Less people in local government than there were. A lot of them, like me, are now sort of out there in in the wild world of being self-employed and freelance, but we're all prepared to help. We've got some other events coming up. We probably should have mentioned those. I just suddenly thought, when's our next one? I've completely forgotten. We'll put it on the follow-up, and we're going to be focusing on neighbourhood plans. Sorry about that, Lorraine. On our next event, there is a Keith. Do you want to give a plug for the rural housing, or Tessa? Are you still on with us to give a plug for the sustainable housing event, Rosemary?
Hi everybody. Can I just say that the next event is really the bookings have come in really fast, so I'm afraid I've had to stop the bookings. So we might have to give some thought about how we, you know, share some more information about that particular event. It's the launch of the rural housing protocol for Kent, a guide which is really helpful. But we've had massive uptake, massive interest in that. So I've had to close the bookings today, I'm afraid, for that. So just to warn you, and hopefully some of you might have already booked onto that already, in which case you'll be okay. But yeah, okay, so that's where we're at with that one. But as Jim says, we will be running some further events, so we'll send out some further details as they come along.
So we'll be wrapping up. Well, we're over time, but should we make 2 o'clock our absolute cutoff? So we'll be staying on here. You're very welcome to leave now, but Rosemary will be sending out the stuff to you all, or someone from Rural Kent soon. So and we look forward to you joining us at a future event. So do keep using the messaging and the chat function. Yeah. Anything else? Alison, would you like to add anything?
No, just to echo that, thank you all for coming. It's been really interesting. It's we almost need a kind of forum type area to continue the discussion.
Who knows? Yes, yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe we need a forum, yeah. So we'll have to talk to Elton and Rosa and see if they'll do us a special deal. Yeah. So all right. So look, some really lovely ideas and great chat from you guys. So thanks very much for coming. Like I say, our next session, lunchtime session, will be on neighbourhood planning, and then there is also a sustainable building project or session coming up that Tessa O'Sullivan is organising. Don't know how the bookings are going for that, but hopefully that'll be a really well attended. That's going to be a longer event, so a bit more time to chat, although this has gone a bit longer in any case. But yeah, we're up to our hour and a half nearly, aren't we? My rule has been nearly broken, so you're definitely in due time for a break now. So thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we're all done. Richard's still there. Hi, Richard. Nice to see you. Sort of ish. He's gone. Alison, you and I are going to have to work on our timing. It was probably me, wasn't it? Going on a bit. So sorry about that. But no one complained.
No,
No, I think it was okay.
I was looking at.
Yep, thanks for the intro, Keith.
Okay, I was ready to do an ending piece, but
Sorry, we start recording now as well.
Oh, we are actually, yes. Sorry.